Welcome to the TMAG Bottom Line, where we'll talk about what the TMAG is, what it isn't, similarities and differences to the Gen M3 PMAG, why we made it, and a little bit about how we made it as well. Customers have been asking for a translucent version of the Magpul PMAG for many years, since the original PMAG Gen 1 was introduced, for various reasons, and we've been working on materials behind the scenes in order to produce that. We haven't been satisfied with any of the solutions that we've been able to come up with or that anyone else has come up with to meet our own internal test requirements for magazine performance up until now, which is why you now have the TMAG. So first of all, one of the things we need to cover is why translucent in the first place. One of the obvious things that you may think is visual indication of rounds remaining. I can see what my remaining ammunition supply is, but that's not really kind of the strong point of the translucent magazine. The problem with the translucent magazine is that once the round stack goes up into the magazine well, you kind of lose useful information in a translucent magazine, which is why we've contended from day one and still do that the mag level window is a better way to have a visible indication of rounds remaining, where the colored spring leg decrements along the side of the magazine with the numbers that tell you exactly how many you have, regardless of whether the round stack is inside the magazine well entirely or outside in the window and visible. So we actually believe in that so strongly that we included it in the TMAG itself. So the TMAG, in addition to being translucent, and you can see how many rounds are in it until it goes up into the magazine well. Once it does go up into the magazine well, we have a colored spring leg and numbers along the side of the magazine. So you have that same mag level window functionality in the TMAG, except for the window is the entire magazine in this case. So visible indication of rounds remaining is not the entire reason to do a translucent magazine. So what are the remaining reasons? And there were three main reasons from customer feedback and requests that we felt were very real and needed to be addressed, and why we continued with the translucent magazine efforts. So the first one is safety. So there are customers who want to use SIMs, UTMs, blanks in a translucent magazine where you can really clearly see that there are no live rounds introduced into the training environment. So SIMs, UTM, blank usage, safety is one of them. The other one is ammunition type identification. So if you've got different types of ammunition, a translucent magazine allows you to see exactly what ammunition you have in the entire magazine at a glance, without concerns about it shifting down halfway through or half loaded with one, half loaded with the other, so you have some kind of party mix going on after a certain number of rounds. So it gives you a clear indication of an ammunition type that is loaded in the magazine. And the last one was a request from foreign militaries and some security kind of operations is accountability of ammunition. So ammunition accountability in guard force turnover specifically. So in certain applications where you had to account for every round when a magazine is handed over to the person that's relieving you on duty, that allows you to very quickly and very rapidly count how many rounds are there, make sure that there are no empty cases mixed in with the live ammunition, and you have an easier guard force turnover with ammunition accountability than counting off all the rounds and then putting them back in the magazine every time. The last reason, which I said there were three, but there's actually four, and the fourth one is really just aesthetics. It comes down to if you prefer the looks of a translucent magazine and what all that gives you, then by all means, that's as viable a reason as anything else. So what can we expect from TMAG Performance? The TMAG is very nearly equal to the Gen M3 PMAG in just about any aspects of reliability. So when it comes hot, cold, adverse conditions, high cyclic rates which require fast stack rise times, dust cabinets, grit, things like that, the TMAG is going to give you the reliability that you expect from the Gen M3 PMAG series. And that includes, like I said, dust cabinet testing, which has been the Achilles heel of every other translucent magazine out there, and honestly most other magazines in general. Dust cabinet test is a tough one. So the TMAG passes all TOP 32045 military specifications tests. That includes the dust cabinet, which we talked about previously. It includes solvents, UV stability, deep compatibility, salt fog and salt spray, long-term loaded storage, and it also includes all the rough handling tests from -60 all the way to +180, including full weapon drop tests in which the magazine survives from the full weight of the loaded weapon being dropped onto the magazine surface. So what is the caveat here? Are there any differences? And yes, there are some differences. The TMAG will pass 32045, all the drop tests and rough handling tests, but it doesn't pass those by the same wide margins that the Gen M3 PMAG family will pass them by. There is a slight bit of a difference there. It does pass all the tests, not by as big of a margin. So why is that? And we can dig into that a little bit. The PMAG Gen M3 series and all the PMAG family right now that are non-translucents are made with a proprietary formulation of polymers additive packages, and reinforcement fibers that come together along with some intelligent design to be what they are, right? The reinforcing fibers are one of those things that you really can't put into a translucent magazine or it doesn't become translucent anymore. So we're searching for a magazine material that is translucent and can meet all of the standards that we require without having reinforcement fibers. That material didn't exist to meet our standards up until very, very recently. This material, that up until a few short years ago, wasn't even in existence. And we got to testing it, and that's when we finally found, hey, we have a solution for TMAG, and brought this to market. But that's not an easy task to have a material that meets these properties without those reinforcing fibers. Those reinforcing fibers are also something that contributes to the longevity, the ridiculously long service life that you can expect with the Gen M3 PMAG. So that's one of the other differences that you'll see in the TMAG. Although, to be fair, unless you're deliberately trying to torture test one magazine until failure with an ungodly number of rounds, it's not something that is even remotely a factor. You can have a handful of magazines that you use with any given rifle that are TMAGs, and you will burn out that barrel long before you have an issue with service life on the magazine. So although it is an issue on paper, as far as a difference on paper as far as service life, it's not something that's likely to be a factor unless you are independently wealthy and can fire hundreds of thousands of rounds a year. So moving on from that, let's talk more about that material and the challenges in finding a translucent material that we cannot use reinforcing fibers in, that meets all those specifications and kind of how we arrived at that and what it needs to do. So what we're asking from a material that we're making a magazine out of is a complex list of requirements. So first of all, it's got to be rigid enough to maintain feed geometry as well as support the round stack and maintain high temperature performance. It also has to be tough or flexible enough to resist damage and breaking. It can't be brittle, especially at cold temperatures. It also has to be resilient enough to, if it does take deflection, to return to that proper geometry. So when some materials that are tough and malleable will be deformed, and then your geometry is altered and your magazine's no longer any good. One of the last things that we also need from a magazine material is surface hardness. And that surface hardness provides kind of a slick surface for feeding, but it also resists grit embedding, which is one of the things that is the big issue when you start talking about translucent materials. So you need high surface hardness in combination with all those other factors to resist grit embedment to get the kind of magazine reliability that you expect, and certainly that we expect from any kind of Magpul product. So as you might guess, and from that list, some of those are competing criteria. So really, when you choose a material for a magazine, it's a balancing act of adjusting the performance within all of those criteria, and different materials have different strengths and weaknesses, putting things together with all the right additive packages, and then you get into mold design as well as geometry and things like that, which is why the TMAG looks different on the outside than the Gen M3 PMAG. You get into mold design and characteristics like that refine that and kind of maximize those material performance characteristics into what is a final product of acceptable mix and balancing act of those characteristics. We've long said that we could make a magazine that you could chuck off of a 10-story building onto concrete and it would survive just fine. It would be the darling of YouTube, right? So the problem is it would be a terrible magazine. It's really easy to make a super durable magazine-shaped object. It's really tough to make a magazine that meets military rough handling specifications as well as has the reliability that we expect from a Magpul PMAG or TMAG kind of product. So that's the challenge. And that's what we try to do every time that we make a magazine, is there's that balancing act. The thing a magazine needs to do is feed. It needs to do it very reliably, and it needs to be durable and pass all those other things as well. But without the reliability in the adverse conditions, you really can't count on it. And that's what the bottom line is for us, and the bottom line of why we made the TMAG out of the material that we made it out of. And so the TMAG material is pretty unique. It is something we found after testing literally thousands of materials over a decade. Since I started Magpul in 2012, it was an ongoing program from even before then, trying to find a translucent material that met the requirements that we had. And we were unhappy with all those solutions and all the competing efforts at this up until now. There have been many other translucent magazine products for various platforms made out there, but none of them have met a reliability and overall performance standard across all of the spectrum of categories that we want a magazine to perform in, until we found the material that works for the TMAG. So once again, I said that's unique. And that brings us to one of the final differences that we have between the TMAG and the Gen M3 PMAG, and that is price. The TMAG is slightly more expensive than the regular PMAG lines, and the reason is that base polymer. So the polymer a combination of polymers actually, that proprietary formulation of polymers and additives and things like that make the TMAG material, it's the most expensive material that we have as far as a polymer material is concerned. It also is really difficult to work with. It requires special molding presses, it requires special mold design, it requires special processes, and I won't get too far into the weeds there because we spent a long time trying to figure this out, and it required the efforts of the people we have here who are a lot smarter than me, so we'll skip past all the finer details and just trust us that this was not an easy process, and it's not a fun thing to work with, so it ends up being a little bit more expensive at the end of the day. So what's the bottom line of the bottom line? The bottom line is that the Magpul Gen M3 PMAG is still the world's premier high-performance magazine, bar none, in all categories and specifications. If you have a need for or desire a translucent magazine, the Magpul TMAG gives you the same reliability in normal and adverse conditions and same expectations of performance as the Gen M3 PMAG, still passes all the mil-spec TOP 32045 tests across the spectrum, and does it in the format of a translucent magazine. So if you have a need or a desire for a translucent magazine and the benefits that it can provide, the Magpul TMAG is your clear choice.